know that whenever there is change, there's also going to be challenge as well. We know there have been very different responses, from people absolutely embracing it and other people, of course, pushing back very hard. So we're not really here to debate whether backlash exists. I think we can all acknowledge it does exist. We see it whether it's in our own organisations, whether we see it more broadly, but to really have a discussion about what works and makes a difference.
I very much believe it. It's not about shutting down views which are oppositional to making progress on gender equality. We must open up the space for all views, engage with those views, but be very strong about why gender equality matters, why it's linked to innovation, why it's linked to productivity, but why it's deeply important for human rights that we move forward, not just as organisations, but as a nation, as Australia.
I think the one that resonates a lot with me is that there's a privilege with being seen as an individual that women are often not afforded. And because of that, you're seen first as a woman and through that lens, and secondly as an individual. And so when you talk about backlash, it really is quite important. And when people talk about fatigue, I find it funny because I'm sort of like, no one's more fatigued than I am. You know, this has been 30 years, and still when you show up, there's a little bit of a question in people's minds.
We were talking about backlash, and I was reflecting on this, and I personally had backlash. You know, I've had a 30-year working career, and I'll tell you my views on targets or quotas. I, as a woman leader, was dead set against quotas. All the way up my career, I said, quotas are bad. And I said, you know what, if there are targets or quotas and I get promoted, I'll be a token woman. I'll be told I only got the job because I was a woman. And I have to tell you, I now think about targets and quotas far differently as a business leader. And as a business leader, I need to drive an organization to outstanding performance, a revenue target, a safety target, a culture target, a profitability target. We have measures for all that. So why wouldn't we have quotas for women in leadership?
So can I just ask though on that, was it the shift in your perspective because of the change in role that actually changed your view, or was it something that happened one day?
Part of it was shift in role. There's no doubt on that. But I also think the thing was, Liz, I got so frustrated with the pace of change. Yeah. I went to my first gender bias training 28 years ago.
I will tell you something, that unless, when you're doing the change of this kind, the reason things don't change is because there are forces that keep it in place. Those forces are very hard to move. They have to change, they deal with status, with political power, with economic power, and changing those not only take courage, that takes tremendous work to make change. You said, why is it taking 28 years? It's not because nobody gets it. It's because, do we really put in the effort and treat it at the same levels of other levels of social injustice?
I agree with Andy. I don't spend any time justifying why this is important, and I'm not going to. I do not do town halls and stand up and say, let me tell you why I think diversity is really valuable for ANZ, right? Because I don't think I have to make that case, to your point. It's like me standing up and saying, let me tell you why integrity is really important in a bank, yeah?
But this stuff is insidious, and it's not just within the workforce, it's in the society that surrounds us. And I actually like the safety analogy, Andy, because on safety, you never get sustainable high safety outcomes just through a compliance focus. You want people to actually believe in the safety case, classic Bradley curve. And so for me, this is the same. Yes, you've got to have the clear standards. You have to be rigorous in setting those standards and upholding them.
There's a bit of it that's what's in it for the men. And people don't like to say that that's important, but I think it has to be. And I think that's why when we talk about inclusiveness, when we talk about flex working, when we introduced that in BP, one of the first people that came to me and took advantage of it was a man, right?
The more transparent we are about the programs and the things we're doing and why, the less kind of backlash. Again, people, and again I'm paraphrasing, people say, look, at least I understand why you're doing it. You've told me, I understand. I may not like it for me, but I understand why you have a program that is only for women.
Is that about taking the fear out of it, I think, which is when you allow all the perspectives. I absolutely agree with you, Shane, to make space for all the perspectives to be aired, because if you try and shut down that person who speaks about what they fear about the future for them, then you just actually send the resistance and backlash underground.
Yes.
And you send them to the other polarity, really, which
Well,
makes it even
I mean, the other feedback we had is what people really dislike is if they see it as in any way being sneaky.
I might add something here,
Yeah.
because I think our experience is different from many others around the table. But there's a whole lot of people in the organization who will say, you know, the nature of mining work is that it's very physical, it has different rosters and so on, and these things are just naturally more suited to men rather than women. So putting in place that aspirational goal of gender balance by 2025 has just mobilized a different energy in the organization and has unlocked a level of creativity that we didn't have there previously. And so it's been focusing on changing the nature of the work. So one of the things we've done is we've been in redesigning facilities to address the very heavy physical strain that's required for some of our work. And lo and behold, not only has that opened the work up for women, we've had a whole lot of men saying, hang on a second, we're being injured less. This feels really good. You know, we're able to, you know, to do this job easier.
When I became CEO in 2013-14, we had 16% of our partners were women. We're now at 25%, and we're nowhere near where we want to be. Our target is 30% in 2 years' time. So, but to get there has been really difficult. And I often use the word trench warfare when I'm talking with my leadership team. And we have 25 senior male partners sponsoring 25 up-and-coming females who are just outside the partnership group. So you run it for 4 years, you've got 100 of your partners out of 500 who've now gone back into the business as senior leaders and have actually become spokespeople and proponents of what we're doing. As the program's progressed, though, we've started to hear a bit of noise in relation to why are all the sponsors men? And then second of all, why is this program only for women? Why can't I as a man get onto this program? And the answer I've given to that across our firm is that we're not. I don't look at this, by the way, through a gender lens. I try and avoid the word gender equality. I talk about fairness in our organisation and talk fairness first.
To get to equality, sometimes you need a bit of inequality. So we have to get the playing field even. You've got to invest a little bit more in programs for women to give them the opportunity to just even the playing field. And that may not seem equal, but you're not starting from equal.
Probably 80 or 90% of what we initially experience as backlash is either because people don't have an understanding of what this is and what it isn't.
But we set the norms, we set the behaviors, we tell people what's expected, we have all the programming to assist them to get there. But at the end of the day, if they don't, you know, then there are other consequences. And that's all change programs have positive and negative consequences. The question that I have, it's really based on a comment that you made, is why do we feel that we have to convince the world that this is the right thing to do?
I 100% agree with that. There's this sense of we've got to convince everyone, and actually you just need critical mass. I do feel like that balance is shifting, and I do feel like that's the strong leadership from corporate Australia, where you both try to engage but you also are not negotiable on your position.
And I think it's very important for us all to acknowledge that we can only be effective here by our own personal responses and taking a very human approach to the challenges.
My message today, I think, to all of us, and we are leaders who are leading the change on gender equality, not necessarily across the world, but in our own organisations and here in Australia, is that it requires persistence and also it requires courage. We must keep pushing forward. Failure is not an option, and that's about using the power and influence that every one of us has.